What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to College Football Talk with Peter Burtonette. The semifinals are set. Got a lot of history in these matchups, but I'm going to be going over the quarterfinals, my takeaways and thoughts on those games in this video. Before I do, if you go on to enjoy, please feel free to leave a like, consider subscribing to the channel, and turn on those post notifications so you're always up to date whenever I upload. I will have videos previewing each of the semifinal games, or both of them, individually later this week leading up into those games. But in this one, I'm going over those quarterfinals. In that first one, Penn State gets a 31-14 win over Boise State. I do think that game was a little closer than indicated, but there were a few key areas that the Nittany Lions took care of business in. For one, they did what I said they would have to do to win this game. That was holding Ashton Jeanty under 150 yards. They actually held him to only 104 yards rushing, and 0 touchdowns on the ground for the Heisman runner-up. So I knew that was going to be key. Penn State has one of the top rushing defenses in college football, and if they were going to win this game, they had to at least slow him down, and they did that almost better than I thought they would. Their run stopping will also be huge in their semifinal matchup against Notre Dame. I'll save some of that again for that preview video, but the Fighting Irish really know how to run the ball as well. There's 3 guys instead of 1, so that almost makes it even more difficult to slow down. Drew Aller as well. I said going into this matchup, it was between him and Maddox Madsen, the Boise State quarterback, who made the big plays, was going to be huge in this one, and Drew Aller did when needed. He didn't have the most efficient game throwing the ball. He was 13 for 25, but he did a really good job of making the key throws. Tyler Warren stepped up, Katron Allen and Nick Singleton as well, their running back tandem. All 3 of those guys, along with Aller, stepped up big time. And their defense was huge as well. They picked off Madsen 3 times, and they also, in spite of missing Abdul Carter, the Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year, for most of the game after he went out with a first quarter injury, they still racked up 3 sacks and 9 tackles for loss. Again, Boise State put together a valiant effort. I wouldn't quite say this was worthy of one score territory, but it was certainly, I think, closer than the 17-point difference. But overall, a big win for Penn State. Really one of James Franklin's big wins, one of the few that he's had there, and they'll have a chance to get an even bigger one in this next game against Notre Dame. Then, in the Peach Bowl, Texas wins 39-31 in double overtime. It was a one-man Skattebo show for Arizona State. Cam Skattebo had a passing touchdown that was actually an audible at the line of scrimmage. He also had 143 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns, and then 99 receiving yards, and actually earned the Offensive Player of the Game award from the Peach Bowl in spite of the losing effort. Quinn Ewers and receiver Matthew Golden and Gunnar Helm were all huge for the Longhorns in this game. They all stepped up with some big plays. Helm had the go-ahead touchdown in double OT that put Texas in control late there. They also, though, had to overcome some kicking struggles. Burt Auburn has been one of the top kickers in college football, but he missed 2 field goals late that would have won the game effectively for Texas, but they had to wait until double overtime, so they kind of got bailed out there. And then one of the top DBs, I think even the Thorpe Award winner, Andrew Mukuba, had a game-sealing interception, a game-ending interception in the second overtime. Something to keep an eye on, though, the Longhorns lost a 16-point lead with just 7 minutes left in regulation, and it evaporated really quickly. I think it went away in a minute 30, maybe a minute 40. So definitely something to keep an eye on there is how these Longhorns close out these games, because they struggled there, and they also struggled against Clemson. And that leads into their next game, which will be against Ohio State, who put a scarlet splattering on the Oregon Ducks, 41-21, and that I don't even think shows how wide a margin there was in this one. The Buckeyes were dominant in running out to a 34-0 start. I think midway through the second quarter, that game was over by halftime. Jeremiah Smith is the best wide receiver in college football. I mean, he's showing that there's no debate. Not just best receiver, not just best freshman receiver, but he's no doubt undisputed best wide receiver in college football. 7 receptions, 187 yards, and 2 touchdowns. That was shades of Jackson Smith and Jigba's performance in the Rose Bowl against Utah a few years ago. The defense was also suffocating, especially through most of kind of the first 20 minutes or so of the game, kind of all the way through the first quarter, a little into the second. Will Howard was clinical with his passes. Chip Kelly's play calling was both smooth and savvy. A play early on getting G. Scott on a wheel route from the running back position. The tight end picked up 30 yards there. He had a good play call with some motion from Emeka Ibuka and then kind of a deep post route with a little stutter step from Jeremiah Smith where he was just wide open. I mean, that's just great play call and scheming from the offensive coordinator for the Buckeyes. Both running backs, Quinshon Judkins and especially Travion Henderson, kind of showed shades of Ezekiel Elliott. That's something that Ohio State fans have been wanting to see for a while, is a running back of that caliber. And I think especially Travion Henderson on his 66-yard run where he kind of hit the outside and ran down the sideline, just 4.3 speed type of run there that really just kind of stamped Ohio State's dominance. So they go into that game against Texas riding a huge high after their win over Tennessee as well. And ultimately, that loss to Michigan, I might talk about this more in the preview of the semifinal, a blessing in disguise. Finally, a game that was delayed, and I want to take this opportunity just to send out prayers for the whole community of New Orleans and for everybody else that was affected by the tragedy on Bourbon Street, pretty much just to start the new year soon after the year turned to 2025, for obviously the victims who lost their lives, praying for their families, and for people who are recovering as well, just that their recovery would be smooth and just come quickly. So that game, the Sugar Bowl between Notre Dame and Georgia, was postponed for about a day, not quite 24 hours. Notre Dame gets a 23-10 win, and this was a game that changed mightily quickly. It went from 3-3 late in the second quarter to 20-3 in a span of 54 seconds, not even a minute of game time. How that started, Notre Dame gets a field goal, then they get a turnover and get a touchdown. It was the second turnover. Georgia had one early in the game as well where they were inside the Notre Dame red zone, missed out an opportunity to score there. Of course, there was the penalty that I think got a little bit more attention than it probably deserved, where the Georgia player he got onto the sideline, interfered with the referee, and they got a sideline warning that stalled momentum on that series. But I don't think that was a game-changing play like ESPN, even covering the game, said it was. Georgia just they didn't have the offense. It's what I expected. Gunnar Stockton didn't look like a deer in headlights. It just looked like he didn't quite have enough in this moment against one of the top defenses in college football. He certainly has room to develop. I mean, throwing him into the fire there with his first start against arguably one of the top defenses in college football is not an easy assignment. The Fighting Irish, they locked down the Dogs. They forced 2 fumbles. Georgia was 2 of 12 on third down and 0 for 3 on fourth down. Riley Leonard got it done. He only accounted for 170 total yards, 90 throwing and 80 running, but he was incredibly efficient and made the plays when he needed to, and his defense backed him up. And the other big swing in that momentum change that I mentioned earlier was a 98-yard kick return for a touchdown by Jaden Harrison that really put it all in Notre Dame's hands, made it a 20-3 margin to start the second half, and from there their defense really did the rest. So we've got a really exciting semifinal round. We have a lot of history. We have 2 of the longest for a long time or even current independents. Obviously, Penn State, longtime independent before joining the Big Ten in, I think, 1990. Notre Dame, still an independent. A lot of history between those 2 teams. And then 2 of the biggest brands in college football as Ohio State and Texas face off in the Cotton Bowl. So I am really looking forward to those semifinal games. Obviously, as a Buckeye, I'm most looking forward to that one, but I'm looking forward to that Penn State Notre Dame game the day before. But let me know your thoughts on the quarterfinals and your early predictions for those semifinal games. Again, I'll have videos previewing both of those games coming up here in the next few days. But that's all for this episode of College Football Talk. I'm your host, Peter Burtnett, signing out. Peace.